Betrayal doesn't always come with a warning. Sometimes it's as quiet as a whisper at a dinner table or as sudden as a hand striking your face in front of everyone you love. Before you hear my story of revenge and redemption, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know where my sisters in arms are gathering. I never thought my own son would be capable of such cruelty. But when you've spent 75 years on this earth like I have, you learn that people, even your own flesh and blood, can surprise you in the worst ways. I gave him every chance to do the right thing, but in the end, he saw me as nothing more than a convenience, a burden, and an outlet for his frustration. And when I finally stood up for myself, well, that's when I learned what he was truly capable of. I've lived in Millfield, Connecticut for over 40 years. It's a quaint little town in the southern part of the state, the kind of place where people know your business before you do. I moved here with Walter when we were middle aged, back when his investment banking career was just taking off, and I still believed in forever. Our federal style house sits on Chestnut Street with its wraparound porch and black shutters that always reminded me of a historical landmark dropped into suburban America. The neighbors used to call it the Morrison Manor. Now they just whisper when I walk by. That Thursday morning before Thanksgiving, I was polishing the silver serving dishes my grandmother had left me, the ones with the delicate filigree edges that take forever to clean but look stunning on a holiday table. My arthritic fingers protested, but I kept at it. I'd been hosting Thanksgiving dinner for 35 years, and despite everything that had happened, this year wouldn't be any different. My phone buzzed on the counter. Robert's name flashed on the screen. My son, 52 years old now, with my late father's prominent nose and his father's calculating eyes. Mom, he said when I picked up, his voice carrying that forced cheerfulness he'd perfected over the years. Just wanted to confirm we're still on for tomorrow. Christine's bringing her cranberry relish. Everything's ready, I said, running my thumb over a water spot on the silver. Dinner at 3, same as always. Great. Also, Dad want me to ask if it's okay if he comes a bit early. Says he has some papers he needs you to sign. The serving spoon in my hand stilled. Walter and I had been divorced for 10 years, the kind of divorce where 45 years of marriage ends with an email and an empty closet. The kind where your husband leaves you for his 58-year-old personal trainer and tries to hide half the assets you built together. What papers? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Something about the vineyard property, he said. It's just a formality. The developers need both signatures since you bought it together. The vineyard. Our weekend retreat in the Litchfield Hills that Walter had insisted we keep in both our names after the divorce, for tax purposes, he'd claimed. The one asset the divorce lawyers hadn't fought over. Fine, I said after a moment. Tell him to, Bab. Thanks, Mom. And one more thing, Nathan might be bringing someone. Nathan, my grandson, 24, and already carrying himself with the same entitlement his father had perfected. That's fine. There's plenty of food. Great. See you tomorrow. After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the polished silver. The face looking back at me had changed so much over the decades. Deep creases around the eyes, silver hair cropped in a stylish bob, a certain hardness around the mouth that hadn't been there in my wedding photos. I'd given Walter 3 children, Robert, Catherine, and Michael. Only Robert still lived nearby. Catherine had moved to Oregon years ago, calling only on birthdays and Christmas. Michael had died of cancer 15 years earlier, leaving behind a void that nothing could fill. Walter hadn't stayed for the entire funeral. I'd never forgiven him for that. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the vineyard, the one place that had remained untouched by the bitterness of our divorce, the place where I'd taught the children about winemaking, where we'd watched meteor showers under summer stars, where Michael had celebrated his last birthday before the diagnosis, the one piece of our history that Walter hadn't tainted. At 1:45 the next day, the doorbell rang. Walter stood on my porch, his white hair perfectly coiffed, wearing one of those cashmere sweaters that his new wife, Diane, picked out for him. At 78, he still maintained the fit physique of a man a decade younger. Money and vanity were powerful motivators. Vivian, he said with that practiced smile, you look well. Come in, Walter, I replied, stepping aside. Robert mentioned papers. His cologne, different from what he'd worn during our marriage, filled the entryway as he followed me to the living room. I wondered if Diane had chosen that too. Yes, just a formality, really. He pulled an envelope from his leather briefcase. The development company needs both our signatures since we're still co-owners. Development company? He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Robert didn't tell you. We're selling the vineyard property. They're building a luxury resort, spa, golf course. The offer is substantial. The room seemed to tilt slightly. You're selling our vineyard without discussing it with me first? Walter had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable. I thought Robert would have mentioned it. We've been talking about it for months. Months. My son and ex-husband had been planning this for months, and neither had bothered to tell me. The property has been sitting unused, Walter continued, his tone shifting to the one he used when explaining complicated matters to me. It makes financial sense, Vivian. The return on investment is— Stop, I held up my hand. Just stop talking to me like I'm a child, Walter. He sighed, that familiar exasperated sound that always made me feel small. The papers are here. The sale is going through whether you sign today or next week. I just thought it would be easier to handle it before everyone arrives. Easier for him, of course, always for him. How much? I asked. What? How much are they paying for the property? He named a figure that made my eyebrows rise. It was considerably more than I'd expected, enough to set me up comfortably for the rest of my life, even split in half. And when were you planning to tell me about my share? Walter shifted uncomfortably. Well, that's the thing. The investment was technically made from my premarital assets. My lawyer has the documentation. Your premarital assets? I laughed, a sharp sound that seemed to surprise both of us. Walter, we bought that property 20 years into our marriage with money we saved together. Technically, the initial down payment came from my inheritance, and every payment after that came from my earnings. The earnings I supported by raising your children and managing your household while you built your career, the earnings I contributed to by working as your office manager for 15 years without a salary. His jaw tightened. Vivian, don't make this difficult. The paperwork is straightforward. You sign, I sign, and this ends cleanly. Like our marriage ended cleanly? The words escaped before I could stop them. The doorbell rang again. I glanced at my watch. 2:30. Robert was early. We'll discuss this later, Walter said, tucking the papers back into his bag. I opened the front door to find Robert and his wife, Christine, their son, Nathan, and a young woman I didn't recognize. Behind them stood my daughter, Catherine, whose presence surprised me. She hadn't mentioned flying in from Portland. Mom, Robert embraced me stiffly. Look who made it! Kate surprised us at the airport last night. Catherine stepped forward, her expression guarded. Hi, Mom. Hope it's okay I crashed Thanksgiving. Of course it is, I said, hugging her. She felt thin in my arms. It's been too long. As everyone moved into the living room, I noticed the glances exchanged between Walter and Robert. Something unspoken passed between them, something that made my skin prickle with unease. I retreated to the kitchen to check on the turkey, my mind swimming with questions. Why was Catherine really here? Why was Walter trying to cheat me out of the vineyard proceeds? And why did I feel like I was walking into an ambush in my own home? Need any help, Mom? Robert appeared in the doorway, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. No, everything's under control. I wiped my hands on my apron, though you could have warned me about the vineyard. His expression shifted too quickly to hide his guilt. Dad asked me not to say anything until the deal was closer to final. He didn't want to upset you unnecessarily. Upset me? It's my property too, Robert. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Mom, Dad's just trying to make things simple. The money could help everyone. Nathan's law school is killing us, and Kate's restaurant needs investors. So that was it. They'd already decided how to spend my share of the money. And what about what I need? I asked quietly. He looked genuinely confused. You have this house, your pension. What else do you need at your age? At my age? as if being 75 meant I should quietly accept whatever scraps they decided to throw my way. The turkey should be ready in 30 minutes, I said, instead of answering. Tell everyone to get settled at the table. As Robert left, I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the feast I'd spent days preparing. In that moment, I felt a coldness settle over me, a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. They thought I would roll over, sign away my rights, be the accommodating mother and ex-wife I'd always been. They were wrong. I carried the turkey to the dining room with practiced ease, despite the weight of it. The table was a picture of holiday perfection, crystal glasses catching the light from my grandmother's candelabra, autumn-colored napkins folded just so, name cards written in my best calligraphy. Old habits die hard. It looks beautiful, Mom, Catherine said, her voice light, but her eyes never left the screen of her phone. She scrolled absently, the glow reflecting in her wineglass as if the table, the meal, the effort, none of it required her full attention. Everyone took their seats, falling into familiar positions like actors in a play they'd long since memorized. Walter, of course, claimed the head of the table opposite me, his domain, his throne, a position he'd held without question for decades. To his right sat Robert and Christine, polished and rehearsed. To his left, Catherine, still scrolling. Beside me, Nathan slid into place with a tired smile, his girlfriend Lily, new, polite, a bit too eager, following just behind. She introduced herself again, even though we'd already met in the foyer, and then there was the empty chair. Michael's chair. It had been untouched for years now. Still there, still waiting, like some unspoken placeholder for the son who had left and never come back. No one mentioned it. No one ever did. Walter raised his wineglass, his voice full and firm. And before we eat, he declared, I'd like to propose a toast. He paused, eyes locking with mine across the candle-lit table. There was something pointed in his stare. Not warmth, not nostalgia. Something else. To family, he said with deliberate weight. To new beginnings. Glasses clinked in chorus. To family, they echoed. The words rang hollow. I smiled, polite, practiced, and reached for the carving knife. The turkey was perfect. Golden skin, rosemary crisped just right. I began slicing, each motion steady and slow. Actually, Robert said as I served, his voice full of something he couldn't quite suppress. Anticipation? Triumph? We have some news to share. Christine reached for his hand, her smile radiant and slightly theatrical. We're moving, she said. Robert's been offered a senior position at Walter's new investment firm. I paused only briefly to pass another plate. Congratulations, I said evenly. Where to? London, Robert replied, clearly proud. The European headquarters are there. I set the carving knife down, gently, the sound of metal against wood, sharp in the quiet. London, I repeated, my eyes on him now. That's quite far. It's an incredible opportunity, Walter cut in, before Robert could answer. I've been grooming Robert for this role for months. He's ready. The compensation package is substantial, housing, private schools for the kids, even a driver. I nodded slowly, letting the information sink in, then turned toward Nathan. And your law school? Nathan gave a half shrug, looking vaguely embarrassed. Gap year, he mumbled. Grandpa's hooking me up with an internship over there. Some legal department stuff, corporate compliance. Lily placed a hand gently on his arm, smiling supportively, but her eyes flickered to me, nervous, uncertain. She could sense the shift in the room, we all could. Everything was changing. Again. And I hadn't been asked, not consulted, just informed, like a guest at my own table. Walter was beaming like a proud patriarch. The position comes with a substantial signing bonus, enough to cover the vineyard renovations Robert's been wanting to do. My head snapped up. Vineyard renovations? A moment of awkward silence descended. Robert cleared his throat. Actually, Mom, that's something we wanted to discuss. Dad's offering me his half of the proceeds from the vineyard sale. The room felt suddenly airless. His half? I repeated slowly. Well, yes, Walter said smoothly. Once you've signed the papers, of course, the developers are eager to close before year end. I placed my napkin beside my plate and folded my hands. And what exactly do you think my half should be used for, Walter? He exchanged glances with Robert, the kind of look that had always excluded me. We thought a portion could help Catherine with her restaurant venture, and perhaps a trust for Nathan's education when he decides to return to school. My daughter straightened in her chair. Mom, it's a farm-to-table concept with enormous potential. I've been trying to secure funding for months. I see. I took a sip of water. So you've all decided how to spend my money already? It's not like that, Robert said quickly. We just thought that I wouldn't need it. I finished for him. That at my age, as you put it earlier, I should be content to hand over my assets to my children. Mom, please, Catherine sighed. It's Thanksgiving. Can we not do this now? When would be a better time, Kate? When the papers are signed? When the money's gone? When you're all living your improved lives, funded by the retirement I worked 45 years for? Walter's jaw tightened. Vivian, you're being dramatic. Nobody has taken anything from you. This is about family planning, asset management. No, Walter, I said. This is about control, the same control you've exerted since the day we married. A tense silence fell over the table. Lily shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Mom, Robert said in the placating tone he'd inherited from his father, no one's trying to control you. We're trying to help you make the smart financial decision. The smart financial decision, I repeated. And that would be signing away my rightful half of the vineyard proceeds so you can renovate a property I co-own, but apparently won't have access to. You'd always be welcome to visit weekly, Christine offered. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. How generous. Walter leaned forward, his voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet tone I knew too well. Vivian, I strongly suggest you consider the bigger picture here. Robert's opportunity in London is partly contingent on certain financial arrangements being in place. Are you threatening me, Walter? I'm explaining reality. My firm is making this investment in Robert's future. The vineyard funds would ensure a smooth transition for the entire family. I looked at my son, the boy I'd nursed through fevers, taught to ride a bike, helped with science projects late into the night. And you're okay with this? With your father using your career as leverage to coerce me? Robert had the decency to look uncomfortable. It's not coercion, Mom. It's practical. The money would benefit everyone. Everyone except me? Jesus, Mom, Catherine interjected. It's not always about you. Robert has a family to think about. I'm trying to build something meaningful. Why can't you support us for once? For once? I set down my fork with deliberate care. I have supported you your entire lives. I put my career on hold. I ran this household. I was there for every game, every recital, every parent-teacher conference while your father built his empire. And you've been well provided for. That's not fair, Robert protested. Dad was generous in the settlement. Is that what he told you? I looked at my son. Did he also tell you that he hid assets, that he moved money offshore before filing, that his lawyer threatened to drag out proceedings until I couldn't afford to fight anymore? Walter's face flushed with anger. That's enough, Vivian. No, I don't think it is. I stood up, my napkin falling to the floor. For 10 years, I've kept quiet. I've played the role of the gracious ex-wife. I've welcomed all of you into my home, cooked your meals, remembered your birthdays. And this is how you repay me? By conspiring behind my back? Mom, you're overreacting, Robert said, rising as well. Nobody's conspiring against you. Really? Then why did your father wait until today to present these papers? Why did none of you mention this sale before now? Why are you all sitting at my table eating my food while plotting to take what's rightfully mine? The room fell silent. It's not yours, Walter said finally, his voice cold. It was never yours. The vineyard, this house, the lifestyle you've enjoyed, it all came from my work, my sacrifices. I felt something break inside me, the last thread of restraint I'd been clinging to for years. Your sacrifices? My voice was dangerously quiet. Tell me, Walter, what exactly did you sacrifice? Your family? Your integrity? Because from where I'm standing, you've taken everything and given nothing in return. Walter's eyes narrowed. He pushed back from the table and stood. With deliberate movements, he walked to where Robert sat and leaned down, whispering something in his ear. I watched my son's face change as Walter spoke, his expression hardening, jaw clenching, eyes growing cold. Robert rose slowly from his chair, fists clenched at his sides. And then everything happened at once. Robert stepped toward me, his face a mask of rage I'd never seen before. His hand swung through the air, fast and vicious. The crack of palm against cheek echoed in the suddenly silent room. The force knocked me sideways. I stumbled, colliding with the serving cart. China crashed to the floor as I caught myself against the wall, my cheek burning with the imprint of my son's hand. For one frozen moment, no one moved, no one spoke. I tasted blood, metallic and warm. My ear rang. The room seemed to tilt and sway. Christine gasped. Catherine's hands flew to her mouth. Nathan stood halfway from his chair, shock freezing him mid-motion. But instead of crying, instead of collapsing, instead of begging, all reactions they might have expected from the woman they thought me to be. I smiled. The smile felt strange on my stinging face, but I held it as I straightened my spine and met my son's eyes. "Thank you," I said softly. Robert blinked, confusion replacing rage. His hand hovered in the air between us as if he couldn't quite believe what he had done. "You just lost the one thing you always wanted," I continued, my voice steady despite the burning in my cheek. "Mom," Robert stammered, suddenly looking like a little boy again, horrified by his own actions. Walter stepped forward, his face hard. "Robert was right to put you in your place. Your behavior is unacceptable." I laughed then, a genuine laugh that seemed to unnerve them all more than any scream could have. "My place?" I touched my cheek gently. "Is this where you think my place is, Walter? On the floor with the broken china? Is that what you taught our son?" "Stop being so dramatic," Walter snapped, but there was something new in his expression now. Weariness. "Robert, apologize to your mother," Catherine said, finding her voice at last. "Don't apologize," I said, straightening the tablecloth with trembling hands. "Not yet. First, I want you all to hear something." I moved to the antique secretary desk in the corner of the dining room and retrieved a leather portfolio I'd placed there earlier that morning, a precaution born from decades of marriage to a man who always had a hidden agenda. "What is that?" Walter demanded. "Insurance," I replied, returning to my place at the table. I dabbed my split lip with a napkin before continuing. "Walter, do you remember Michael's funeral?" The non sequitur seemed to throw him. "What? What does that have to do with anything?" "You didn't stay," I said simply. "Our son was being laid to rest, and you left halfway through to take a business call." "That's not fair," he protested, but weakly. "After the service, I found you in your car on a conference call. You told me, 'Life goes on, Vivian. The markets don't stop for grief.'" I opened the portfolio and removed a stack of documents. I realized something that day. "Mom, please," Catherine interrupted. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I countered. "I realized that day that there was nothing sacred to you, Walter. Not our marriage, not our family, not even our son's memory. Everything was transactional." I slid the top document across the table. It was a deed. The deed to the vineyard dated 3 years ago with only my name on it. Walter snatched it up, his face darkening as he read. "This is a forgery. The vineyard is in both our names." "It was," I agreed, "until 3 years ago when I had it transferred solely to me." "You signed the paperwork yourself." "I never signed this." "You did," I said calmly, never raising my voice, "along with dozens of other documents that crossed your desk that week. Your executive assistant at the time, Carolyn, I believe, was quite helpful in ensuring everything was properly prepared." Walter's face twisted, a vein in his temple starting to pulse. "That's illegal. That's fraud." "Actually," I replied, reaching for my glass of water with practiced serenity, "it's not. Carolyn presented the document. You signed it. There were witnesses, notarized, dated, archived. It's all quite legitimate." I leaned slightly forward. "You tricked me for years, Walter, hid things, lied, restructured assets behind my back. I watched, I learned, from the very best." He was losing control now, and he knew it. "You don't understand how any of this works," he snapped. "I understand enough," I said, my tone sharpening. "Enough to know that you tried to cheat me out of my share of the retirement accounts. That you funneled money through shell corporations in the Caymans before filing for divorce, assuming I'd never notice. Walter's jaw clenched. The difference is, I have proof of what you did, I continued. From my side bag, I pulled out a thick document, a detailed report in a branded binder, and placed it beside my plate. The forensic accountant was very thorough. Walter's eyes flicked to the binder like it might bite him. What proof? He growled. Bank transfers, off-book transactions, dummy corporations, the works. I didn't gloat, but I didn't flinch either. I've had this for years. I never used it because I thought peace mattered more, because I thought it was better for the children to keep their image of their father intact. I looked across the table at Robert, who now sat frozen, face buried in his hands. Catherine, pale, stared at her untouched wine. Nathan looked between all of us like he couldn't breathe. But today, I said slowly, I see that my silence has done more damage than speaking ever could. I didn't protect your legacy, Walter. I enabled it. And I won't anymore. Walter's voice dropped to a hiss. This is blackmail. No, I said, my voice steady, unshakable. This is consequence, something you've skillfully avoided your entire life. Until now. I turned toward Catherine. Her lipstick was smudged from biting her lip. Did you know your father's been short in stock in his own company, selling shares quietly through offshore accounts, all while telling the public to invest, to hold, to trust? She blinked, stunned. Dad, is that true? Walter looked like he'd been struck. His color drained to the edge of gray. Vivian, you don't know what you're talking about. Those transactions, those were perfectly legal. Then I'm sure the SEC will agree, I said coolly. The table was silent, the air in the dining room thick with things that had gone unsaid for too long. No one reached for their forks. No one moved. Because this time I wasn't asking to be heard. I was done being ignored. Were they? Then you won't mind if I send this file to the regulatory board, or perhaps to the business press. I'm sure your investors would be fascinated. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. What do you want? Walter finally asked, his voice barely audible. First, I want the true value of the vineyard property, not half, all of it, since I am, as you now know, the sole owner. Walter's jaw worked silently. Second, I want the money you kept from me during the divorce, with interest. That's ridiculous. Third, I continued as if he hadn't spoken, I want a public apology for all of it, the affairs, the lies, the financial manipulation. You're insane, he breathed. No, Walter. For the first time in decades, I'm perfectly lucid. I stood and walked to the china cabinet, retrieving an old photograph in a silver frame. I placed it in front of Robert. Do you remember this day? He looked down at the image, himself, at 12 years old, proudly holding up a cluster of grapes, standing among the vines at the vineyard. You helped with your first harvest, I said softly. Your father was in Tokyo closing a deal. I was the one who taught you how to test for ripeness, how to handle the fruit gently, how to respect the land. Robert's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. What Dad said. What did he say to you, Robert? What words could possibly justify striking your mother? My son looked at Walter, then back at me, shame written across his face. He said you were trying to ruin everything, that you'd always been jealous of my relationship with him, that you were, he swallowed hard, mentally unstable, that sometimes the only way to deal with hysterical women is to shock them back to reality. A cold silence fell over the room. Even Walter seemed to shrink under the weight of his words being spoken aloud. And you believe that? I asked quietly. After 75 years of knowing me, you thought I needed to be struck to regain sanity? Robert couldn't meet my eyes. I don't know what happened. It was like something snapped. Something did snap. I touched my cheek again, every last thread of obligation I felt toward this family. I gathered the documents and returned them to the portfolio. I'll give you all 1 week to meet my terms. After that, these files go to the authorities. You destroy your own family, Catherine whispered. I looked at each of them in turn. Walter, who had discarded me like an outdated appliance. Robert, whose hand had struck me with such casual violence. Catherine, who couldn't be bothered to call her mother more than twice a year but expected a handout. You destroyed this family long before today, I said finally. I'm just the one acknowledging it. I walked to the doorway, then paused. I think Thanksgiving dinner is over. Please see yourselves out. And Walter, don't forget to take those vineyard sale papers with you. They're worthless now. No one moved as I stood, turned, and walked silently upstairs to my bedroom. The sound of my footsteps on the polished wood felt distant, muffled beneath the pressure building behind my ribs. I closed the door softly behind me and turned the lock with a quiet click, final, intentional. Only then did I allow my hands to shake. Slowly, I brought them to my face, fingertips brushing over the rising heat of my cheek, the sting of a split lip. The skin there pulsed, tender and raw. But that wasn't what stopped me in front of the mirror. No, what made me pause was the woman staring back. It wasn't the bruise forming, or the smudge of dry blood. It was the clarity in her eyes, the way her spine stayed straight even as her body ached. She didn't look like someone broken. She looked like someone finished waiting, finished forgiving, finished hoping people would see her if she stayed quiet enough. For the first time in decades, I saw myself clearly, not as Walter's ex-wife, not just Robert or Catherine's mother, but as Vivian Morrison, a woman who had endured enough and who had quietly prepared for this exact moment. I heard the front door slam downstairs, muffled voices, footsteps retreating. No one came to check on me. No one called my name or knocked on the door to ask if I was all right. And honestly, I was glad. It was cleaner this way, easier. The silence was confirmation of everything I already knew. I walked to my closet, pulled open the oak door, and reached for the pre-packed suitcase on the top shelf, ready, waiting. I'd filled it 3 days ago when Robert called to warn me that Walter would be coming early, under the pretense of needing just one more signature. A woman doesn't survive 45 years of marriage to a man like Walter Morrison without developing instincts. Mine had spoken loud and clear, and I had listened. I changed clothes quickly, efficiently, comfortable shoes, coat with deep pockets, hair tied back. Then I grabbed the suitcase, took one last glance at the room that had held so much silence and compromise, and walked out. I had one stop to make before I left town, one final piece to set in place. An inheritance far different from the one they were expecting. The law office of Eleanor Blackwell sat quietly at the corner of Main and Bridge, a stately Victorian turned firm, its windows warm with amber light even on a holiday evening. I'd chosen her for a reason. When I filed for divorce 10 years ago, Walter never saw it coming. Eleanor was the only female partner at one of Southern Connecticut's most cutthroat legal firms, and she had a reputation for winning battles before the first paper was even filed. When Walter first saw her name on the divorce papers, he scoffed. A woman divorce attorney? Really, Vivian? That's a bit on the nose, isn't it? What he never knew was that Eleanor and I had been roommates at Vassar. We'd shared more than a dorm, dreams, disappointments, and eventually a reunion that changed everything. We reconnected at an alumni event 6 months before I filed, right around the time I found a receipt for a diamond bracelet I never received. Eleanor had remembered everything, and she had quietly gone to work. Now, as her assistant opened the office door and ushered me in, Eleanor rose from behind her sleek desk, eyes widening as she caught sight of my face. "My God," she breathed, moving around the desk with urgency. "Vivian, what happened?" I set my purse down gently on the visitor's chair, my voice dry but steady. "Family Thanksgiving." She didn't smile. "Rebecca," she called toward the hallway, "hold all my calls and bring an ice pack. Now." As the door clicked shut behind her assistant, Eleanor guided me gently into the leather chair across from her. She handed me the ice pack, which I pressed carefully to my cheek. "I have time," she said, lowering herself into the seat across from me. "Tell me everything." And I did. I laid it out. Walter's provocations, Robert's announcement, the rising tension, the slap that stunned the room. Eleanor didn't interrupt. She listened, her jaw tightening as I spoke, the line between friend and attorney hardening with each detail. When I finished, her voice was low, almost cold. Your son hit you? I nodded. Yes. She was silent for a long moment. Do you want to proceed? I do, I said, without hesitation. Immediately. She nodded. The deed transfer's been prepared. We'll finalize the filing first thing tomorrow morning. They'll be scrambling, I added. Walter will call his attorneys tonight, trying to verify the vineyard deed. He'll want to stop it. He won't, she said, reaching into her drawer for the relevant documents, because everything's already in motion. I leaned back, ice pack resting in my lap now. For the first time all night, I felt my shoulders loosen. Walter taught me how to fight dirty. Eleanor taught me how to fight smart. And now, finally, I was fighting back, with everything I had left. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. Then we should move quickly. The trust documents are prepared as we discussed. All that's needed is your signature and the transfer of assets. She slid a thick folder across the desk. Inside were the papers establishing what would come to be known as the Morrison Women's Foundation, though family had taken on a very different meaning in my mind. Everything is in order, Eleanor continued. Once executed, the bulk of your assets, the vineyard proceeds, your retirement accounts, this house, will be held in the trust with the stipulations we discussed, and it's irreversible. Once I sign? Yes. Neither Walter nor your children will be able to contest it. The assets will no longer be in your name, so they won't be subject to any claims Walter might try to make. I reviewed the documents carefully. A lifetime with Walter had taught me never to sign anything without reading every word. The terms were exactly as I'd specified, strict, unambiguous, and utterly without sentimentality. What about the video testimony? I asked. Eleanor tapped a few keys on her computer. Our legal videographer can be here in 30 minutes. With that split lip and bruise forming, the timing couldn't be better for documenting the duress angle. I almost smiled, but my swollen lip protested. You think they'll try to claim I wasn't of sound mind? Walter will try everything, she confirmed. But between the video, your medical examination records we'll secure tomorrow, and the witnesses at dinner, particularly that girlfriend of your grandson's, he won't get far. I signed where indicated, my signature strong and clear. With each stroke of the pen, I felt a weight lifting, 45 years of accommodation, of compromise, of silent suffering falling away page by page. What about the other matter? I asked as I signed the final document. Eleanor pulled another folder from her drawer. The whistleblower submission to the SEC is prepared. Once you give the word, it goes out. Not yet, I said. Let's see if Walter meets my terms first. That's his one chance. You're more generous than I would be, Eleanor observed. It's not generosity, I replied. It's strategy. If he agrees to my terms, he admits guilt. If he fights me, the consequences will be far worse. The videographer arrived, and for the next hour I gave my testimony, a clinical recounting of not just the day's events, but 45 years of psychological and financial manipulation. The camera captured every detail of my injured face, every tear I refused to shed, every moment of clarity that had brought me to this point. When it was done, I felt hollowed out, but strangely peaceful. Where will you go tonight? Eleanor asked as we concluded. You shouldn't be alone, and you certainly shouldn't go back to the house. I've booked a room at the Litchfield Inn, I said. Walter would never think to look for me there. He always considered it beneath his status. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Smart, and after that? The vineyard. It's closed for the season, but I had it opened up and stocked last week. No one knows I have plans to be there. You've thought of everything. I've had 10 years to think, I replied, and a lifetime before that to learn. The Litchfield Inn was a modest but clean establishment on the outskirts of town. I checked in under my maiden name, using the credit card I'd established separately after the divorce, another lesson learned from watching Walter's financial machinations over the years. My phone had been buzzing incessantly since I left the house, 15 missed calls from Robert, 7 from Catherine, 4 from Christine, dozens of text messages ranging from apologetic to accusatory, none from Walter. He would be speaking through his attorneys now. I silenced the phone and ran a bath, carefully removing my holiday outfit, the burgundy wool dress, now spotted with blood, the pearl earrings Walter had given me on our 25th anniversary, I placed them in a plastic hotel laundry bag, sealing it as evidence. As I eased into the hot water, wincing as it touched the scrape on my elbow from when I'd fallen, my mind drifted to Michael, my middle child, the peacemaker, the one who had seen through his father's charm to the calculation beneath. Mom, he'd said once during one of Walter's extended business trips, you know you deserve better, right? He'd been 30 then, home for Christmas, watching me make elaborate preparations for a husband who would ultimately call on Christmas Eve to say he'd been delayed in Frankfurt. I hadn't answered him. What could I say? That I'd invested too many years? That I didn't know who I was apart from being Walter's wife? That I was afraid? Michael had died, never knowing if I'd hurt him, never seeing me stand up for myself, never witnessing his mother become the woman she might have been. The thought brought the first real tears of the day. I let them come, there in the anonymous hotel bathroom, where no one could see, where no one would use my grief as evidence of weakness. My phone buzzed again from the bedside table. I rose from the bath, wrapped myself in the hotel robe, and checked the screen. A text from an unknown number. I know what happened. Wanna help. Meet me. I stared at it, considering. Then another message appeared. This is Lily, Nathan's girlfriend. Please, Mrs. Morrison, this isn't right. The girl had seemed uncomfortable at dinner, shrinking in her chair as the confrontation escalated. I hadn't expected to hear from her. How did you get this number? I texted back. From Nathan's phone. He's with his dad and grandfather right now. They're at your house, planning something. I frowned. What are they planning? I don't know exactly, but I heard Walter say something about commitment papers before I left. Mrs. Morrison, I'm scared for you. Commitment papers, of course. Walter's next play would be to try to have me declared mentally incompetent, the classic move of powerful men throughout history when faced with women who refuse to comply. Where are you now? I asked. Coffee shop on Elm Street, the one with the red awning. I considered my options. Meeting with Lily could be valuable. She was a potential witness, but it could also be a trap. Walter was certainly capable of using the girl to lure me out. Send me a photo of where you are right now, I texted. A moment later, a selfie appeared, showing Lily alone at a corner table, the coffee shop's distinctive red walls behind her. Through the window beside her, I could see the darkened storefronts of Elm Street confirming her location. Stay there. 20 minutes, I replied. I dressed quickly in the spare clothes from my suitcase, jeans, a sweater, a knit cap to hide my distinctive silver hair. Before leaving, I took photos of my injuries and emailed them to Eleanor with a brief note explaining where I was going and why. Another lesson Walter had inadvertently taught me. Always leave a paper trail that someone else can follow. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived. Most people were still at home with their families, enjoying the holiday I had fled. Lily waved from her corner table, her young face etched with concern as she took in my swollen cheek. Mrs. Morrison, I'm so sorry, she said, as I slid into the seat across from her. What happened today was awful. Thank you for reaching out, I said carefully, but I need to know, why are you helping me? You barely know me. Lily looked down at her coffee cup. My grandfather used to treat her the way your ex-husband treats you, the way Robert treated you today. She looked up, eyes suddenly fierce. Nobody helped her. Nobody believed her. I can't just watch it happen again. For a moment, I saw my younger self in Lily's determined face, before Walter, before compromise, before I'd learned to make myself small. What exactly did you hear them saying? I asked. Walter's been on the phone with someone he called Dr. Mercer. He wants you evaluated for, she frowned, trying to recall the exact words, acute stress disorder with paranoid features. He said your behavior has been erratic for months, that you've been making wild accusations. I nodded. Gregory Mercer, a psychiatrist who'd testified in several of Walter's business lawsuits. A hired gun. They're talking about an intervention getting you committed for evaluation. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. Nathan was upset about it, but his dad shut him down, said it was for your own good. I took a sip of the coffee she'd ordered for me, the hot liquid stinging my split lip. Thank you for telling me this. What will you do? I studied her, young, earnest, clearly frightened but determined. Lily, the less you know, the better. You've taken a risk coming here. I recorded some of it, she blurted out, sliding her phone across the table. I started recording when things got weird. I stared at the device. That could be illegal in Connecticut without consent. She smiled faintly. I'm pre-law at Yale. One-party consent applies if you're part of the conversation. I said enough, to count. Smart girl, I played the recording. 3 minutes of Walter's voice outlining his plan to have me helped, Robert's hesitant agreement, a doctor's clinical tones discussing sedation options. May I send this to myself? I asked. She nodded. I forwarded the audio file to my email, then to Eleanor. You should go back, I said, returning her phone. If you're gone too long, they'll get suspicious. What about you? Where will you go? Somewhere safe, I assured her. And Lily, when things start happening, and they will, stay close to Nathan. He may need someone who sees clearly. She nodded solemnly, then hesitated. Mrs. Morrison, that thing you said after Robert, after he hit you, about him losing the one thing his father always wanted, what did you mean? I smiled thinly. He'll find out soon enough. The vineyard was still and silent when I arrived just after midnight. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the dormant vines surrounding the property. I unlocked the door with the key I kept separate from my regular keyring, another habit born from years of strategic thinking. Inside, the air was cold but not freezing, thanks to the caretaker who had turned on the heat at my request 3 days earlier. The familiar scent of oak and earth enveloped me as I flipped on the lights. This place had always been my refuge. While Walter viewed it as an investment and status symbol, for me, it had been the one place where I could breathe, where the children and I had created memories untainted by Walter's domineering presence. I moved through the rooms, checking that everything was in order. In the master bedroom, fresh linens awaited. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed, stocked with enough provisions for several weeks. By 2 a.m., everything was prepared. I took my medications, applied arnica to my bruised cheek, and settled into the worn leather chair by the fireplace, the same chair where I'd read stories to my children decades ago. Outside, the snow continued to fall, wrapping the world in silence. I must have dozed because the next thing I knew, watery morning light was filtering through the windows. My phone showed 7:36 a.m. and 22 new messages. The first was from Eleanor. Papers filed. Trust established. Officers will visit Morrison residence at 9 a.m. with restraining order. The second was from Lily. They're going to your house at 8. Doctor and 2 men he called orderlies. Be safe. The others were increasingly frantic messages from Robert and Catherine. I deleted them without reading. At precisely 9:15 a.m., my phone rang. It's done, Eleanor said without preamble. Walter, Robert, and the good Dr. Bahadur Mercer were served with restraining orders. The police have your statement and photos. The trust is registered, and the video deposition has been duplicated and secured. How did they react? I couldn't help asking. Walter threatened every legal action imaginable. Robert broke down completely. There was also another man there, a psychiatrist, with 2 rather large assistants. They seemed quite surprised to find law enforcement waiting instead of a vulnerable woman. I closed my eyes briefly. And the other matter? The package was delivered to all trustees simultaneously at 9 how. I imagine the calls are starting right about... My phone beeped with an incoming call. The chairman of Walter's company. That would be William Hargrove, I said. Right on schedule. Do you want me to conference in? No, this one I need to handle personally. I switched calls. William, good morning. Vivian. His voice was tight with controlled panic. I've just received some concerning documentation regarding Walter. Troubling, isn't it? I kept my tone conversational. Stock manipulation, insider trading, tax evasion, on quite a creative scale. Vivian, these are serious allegations. If they're true, every transaction is documented, William. Every offshore account, every shell company. The forensic accountant's report is quite thorough. A beat of silence. Why are you bringing this to the board now? Because I tried to handle it privately. I gave Walter the opportunity to make things right. He chose another path. He says you're unwell, that this is some kind of revenge tactic. Does an unwell person document transactions with this level of precision? Do they provide corroborating evidence from three separate financial institutions? I paused. Walter attempted to have me involuntarily committed this morning, William, to discredit me before I could expose him. Another silence, longer this time. What do you want, Vivian? Justice, accountability. Walter needs to resign today with a full admission of his financial improprieties. That would destroy him professionally. Yes, I agreed. It would. And if he refuses, then this same documentation goes to the SEC, the FBI Financial Crimes Unit, and the Wall Street Journal today. The line went quiet again. Finally, William spoke, his voice heavy. I'll call an emergency board meeting. You'll have his resignation by noon. Thank you, William. As I ended the call, another came in immediately. Robert. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. Mom, please, I don't know what's happening. There are police here, lawyers, Dad's losing his mind. Please call me back. I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me yesterday. Please, Mom, I need to talk to you. I deleted it without responding. Next came Catherine. Mom, this is insane. Whatever Dad did to you, this is between you two. Why are you dragging us into it? Call me back. Delete. By noon, as promised, I received an email from William containing Walter's resignation letter, a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak acknowledging errors in judgment and personal issues requiring attention. By 2 note, the news had hit the Bay financial press. Walter Morrison, investment banker, stepping down amid allegations of financial misconduct. By 4:00, my phone had 43 missed calls. I answered none of them. Instead, I sat by the fireplace watching snow blanket the vineyard and opened the final folder I'd brought with me. Michael's last letter, written a month before the cancer took him. Mom, I hope someday you'll see yourself the way I see you. Strong, brilliant, deserving of so much more than the life Dad has carved out for you. You taught me what real strength looks like. Not Dad's bullying or manipulation, but your quiet resilience. Remember what you told me when I was 10 and afraid to stand up to that neighborhood bully. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away, but sometimes the strongest thing is to stand your ground. I hope someday you'll stand your ground, Mom. I hope someday you'll claim the life that should have been yours all along. Love always, Michael. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope. 6 months after the Thanksgiving dinner that changed everything, I sat on the terrace of the vineyard, watching summer light dance across the vines. I'd sold the house in Millfield, donated most of its contents to charity, and made the vineyard my permanent residence. Walter's legal challenges to the trust had failed. His attempts to have me declared incompetent had backfired spectacularly, especially after Lily's recording was played in court. The financial fallout from his resignation had devastated him. The man who had once commanded boardrooms was now facing federal investigations and civil lawsuits. Robert had sent dozens of letters, each more desperate than the last. Catherine had alternated between rage and pleading. Neither had crossed the threshold of the vineyard. I had changed my phone number, my email, my entire life. The only contact I maintained was with Nathan, who had broken with his father and reached out independently. He and Lily visited occasionally, careful to respect my boundaries. Don't you ever miss them? Nathan had asked during his last visit. Don't you ever think about forgiving them? I had looked out at the vines, where I'd once taught his father about patience and cultivation, where I'd watched my children grow, where I'd finally found my own strength. No, I said simply. Some things can't be forgiven. And in that moment, watching the sun set over land that now belonged solely to me, I felt neither regret nor sorrow, only the quiet satisfaction of justice finally served, an inheritance of strength I'd claimed for myself. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.